Welcome to Documentary First, an inside look at documentary filmmaking. I'm your host, Christian Taylor. Unfortunately, Jason Rugg is out sick today, so we are going to have to hope we can get along without him. I'm joined by a very capable filmmaker, however, so I do think that we will be okay. I want to stop before I welcome this amazing filmmaker and just say hello and thank you to our new listeners. I've had some interesting things happen over the last couple of weeks, and we have had an amazing number of people join our Patreon and sign up for our podcast. So I just want to say how much that means to me personally, and we really love to have you listening to the show. All right, now on to the show. Right now we have joining us Nick Bruckman. He is an amazing guy. Nick, I'm so happy to have you here. I've just finished watching your two most recent films, and I'm now a huge fan. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, this is great. I love that you do this and shine the spotlight on, I sometimes think documentary is sort of the stepchild of entertainment. And so, it's really great that folks with the platform are doing this.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Yeah, for me, I'm obsessed with documentary filmmaking, as I'm sure you are. I mean, you've also made some narrative films and some shorts. I've seen that as well. But documentary filmmaking is just so life-changing, not only to me, but to so many others. So I just feel like more people need to know how to make them and need to watch them. So first of all, I want to give your bio, which it's much longer than what I'm about to read. And if people get a moment, they could go and read Nick's bio on his own website. You have two websites, one a personal one, and I think it's Nick NYC. Is that right?
NickNY.com.
NickNY.com. Okay, that's his personal one. You'll find out lots about him there, as well as People's TV, which is his company, and we'll talk about that later. But for right now, I'm going to dive into his bio. He is the founder of People's TV and director of the documentary film Not Going Quietly, which is the one we're here to talk about today primarily. It has just been released and honored with 2 News and Documentary Emmy Award nominations. Not Going Quietly is a documentary that is executive produced by the Duplass brothers and Bradley Whitford, and it follows a father and disability rights activist, Ady Barkan, who following his diagnosis with ALS, headed to Washington, D.C. to expose the fissures in the American healthcare system. Nick wrote and directed this documentary, and since its release, it has left an echo in the activist spaces and the world of filmmaking. It has received 3 IDA nominations for Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Writing, and a nomination for the Critics' Choice Awards at also, and then, I just got to keep going. At South by Southwest, Not Going Quietly won the Audience Award and the Special Jury Prize, which is not easy to do. And he was pre-selected at the Tribeca Film Festival. He also wrote and directed another fantastic film we want to talk about today called Minted, which blew my mind. So let's dive in. Nick, you've been super busy because I think these 2 films have just been released recently, and it's just an incredible body of work. So talk a little bit about what's been going on in your life the last year.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been, really exciting chapter. Not Going Quietly originally was set to come out right when the pandemic happened in 2020. And it was a really upside down moment because I'd spent 3 years from 2018 to 2020 working on that film and telling Ady's story. The pandemic was this huge setback. We were supposed to be at Tribeca. They canceled the festival along with everything else in the world. And we ended up having a whole nother year to work on it and continue to follow Ady's story until the movie finally premiered at South by Southwest 2021 and then went on to play at the 2021 Tribeca Film Festival when they had outdoor-only screenings. This was still the height of the pandemic. And the ride for the film has been really incredible in terms of the awards and recognition, but also just seeing communities, activists, people around the country recognizing Ady's story from grassroots to Capitol Hill. We screened the film inside the Rules Committee in the Capitol with about 5 members of Congress in attendance, including Nancy Pelosi. And to the Emmys, which was just a month ago, which was going to be the closing chapter of that whole kind of journey of telling Ady's story. When that journey ended very tragically last week, very abruptly and unexpectedly when Ady Barkan passed away due to complications of ALS. And I have done about 200 interviews about this film for every platform and podcast, but you're the first person that I'm speaking to since Ady's passing last week. So I'm quite emotional about that, and that is not, it's not something that I can begin an interview without starting with, because forgetting my film, this person is one of the most, I think, incredible civil rights leaders of our generation. And I'm a lot of people are reaching out to me about him, and that they're glad to have my film, and I appreciate that. But I really, the film aside, I want people to know about him and the impact he made, and of course to support his movement and his family in this really difficult time. This only happened a week ago, so it's very painful.
The fact that I just met him yesterday, now I'm very emotional because, of course, that was going to be the first thing that I asked you. Because there is no way not to be emotionally connected to this guy after you watch his story. And that is what I loved about your film, is that it was so personal and intimate. And you felt like you were part of the family, or you felt like you were part of his team, just because how you silently inserted yourself, and how open and vulnerable he and his family were. So I'm heartbroken to
Yeah,
hear that.
yeah.
I
I'm sorry
can't
to share
imagine
that.
how you're feeling.
Yeah, it's very, very fresh. I just came back from the memorial this weekend, and the thing I'll say is, ALS is a brutal and terrible disease. You'll see that in the film itself. Um, the film ends with a happy ending of Ady celebrating the growth of his family and the impact that he's made. But what I'll say is that when we began the project, it was really never sure in any way that Ady would be here when it ended. And he was originally given 2 to 4 years to live in 2016 when he was diagnosed. And here we are in 2013. And he made more of those 7 years, and of his 39 years, than almost anybody in a lifetime. And it's incredibly poignant for me because I just turned 39 myself. And we were the same age. We come from similar backgrounds, both from Jewish kind of intellectual, secular, academic families. His parents live on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, right around the corner from where I grew up. And when I first saw him, I just knew that this could be me. I could have gotten this diagnosis just as well as you could, or anybody else. And what he chose to do with it is, there's kind of a joke in the film about how you shouldn't call disabled people inspiring. It's sort of a trope, that label is ascribed on them, but there's really just no other word for it. His very presence and just looking at him makes you ask the question, is what I'm doing important? Is the way I'm spending my life important? And, that's why he had such an effect on people, all the way from, me and these activists and his family to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Bernie Sanders, all of whom just wrote, incredible tributes to him online. What you think of those politicians, notwithstanding, the fact that they're saying this about him is because they know how important his voice was, and that they want their supporters to know that they stood behind him because of how much he meant to them. So, I say it not in credit to the politicians, who I know we all have mixed feelings about, including Ady did, but to his legacy and to the organizers and activists who he inspired.
Truthfully, it really doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on when you watch this film, because either side has people like Ady. No matter what the issues are, particularly where healthcare is concerned, healthcare is not a Republican or Democratic problem. Everybody has issues with healthcare, no matter what your politics are. So everybody is lobbying the government one way or the other for what their causes are. And so what this film does, I think, is pull you into the high stakes nature of that. And it also shows you that we should go and speak to our representatives that we have elected to office, and that we have the right to do that. You're right. I mean, he is so incredibly inspiring and bold and brave, because I don't know that I would be willing to even fly on a plane and walk to my congressman's door and knock on there and just demand that they talk to me because I wanted an answer. I want them to hear what I mean, it just was incredibly brave. And I think too about his family. I mean, he gave up so much time during a crucial time. We watch him lose his voice during that time. So to me, it was just unbelievable that his family encouraged him to go and sacrifice so that he could have that special time for himself and for others.
Yeah, his family is really incredible. And you talked about the intimacy of the movie. What I really wanted to achieve cinematically and narratively was to show Adi's whole story is about how the personal is political, about how what happens at home, how much time you have with your family is a political issue because it's a healthcare issue. And what I wanted the very intimate and personal scenes with him and the political scenes to feel very integrated to each other. So it wasn't like there was these activist chapters and then the chapters at home, but actually to try to show how even the activism is a celebration of family and joy and community and friendship, much in the way we treat each other on a personal level is a political act. So that was kind of one of the symbolic North Stars we had in the editing of the film, which was very complicated. And we had hundreds of hours of footage to know what the film was about. And rewinding a bit to why I wanted to make the film, I think anybody who makes or appreciates documentary film will understand this, that what got me really excited about it and what made me realize there was a feature when I first started talking to Ady was not just how incredible and funny and sarcastic and, inspiring he was, but when he told me, yeah, so we're going to get on the road, we're going to get an RV, and I'm going to go around and find other sick people. And then we're going to drive them to, we're going to roll up in our wheelchairs to the members of Congress, and we're going to confront those members of Congress with their stories. And we're going to make these social media clips and confront and close that gap between our representatives and the people. And we're going to do that using people's everyday stories. That to me was what the movie is about and what all documentary films are about, which is that stories have power and they can persuade and they can uplift and they can mobilize. And what I think what happens in the film, of course, Ady doesn't win universal healthcare, and that fight carries on after his passing recently. But I think what it did show is this: you can't always convince the politicians, but the witnessing, the sharing of the story has power to make people come together and continue to fight. And, that's what I hope the film does. That's what I believe Ady does. And, Martin Luther King said, moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. So I've been thinking about that a bit. And I think Ady certainly bent the arc a little bit.
I think it's interesting because when you talk about the personal and the political coming together, I did work in Washington. I worked for quite a while in politics. And the thing that I found fascinating is that you could be on the right side of Ady's political leanings. But watching this film and seeing how his personal side and personal story, you can't other him. So what I see out, as I'm looking at our political landscape right now, what everybody's trying to do is other the other side, and they are just an idea, or they're people that are, protesting and they are a problem, or they're creating chaos, or they just want to disrupt. But when you actually see somebody who is, also failing because of this challenge of going to talk to his representatives, there is no way you cannot feel compassion for him, particularly when you hear about the problems with healthcare. I mean, how hard it is just to get a breathing machine, or how hard it is just to get a wheelchair. Even if we weren't going for universal healthcare, how about let's make it easier to, care for our loved ones in our healthcare system. So I thought that was beautiful that, no matter what side you're on in the political spectrum, you have to care about Ady and his situation and the other people that are in his boat after watching your film.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. I mean, I think, again, knowing this is a documentary focused podcast, that's why I wanted to get into this medium in the first place. I do have um, strong political beliefs, obviously, and many of those align with Ady's. I do believe that the government should provide healthcare. Ultimately, we should move towards a universal healthcare system that much of the Western European countries and Canada and other places enjoy. And But I don't think that I think that the way, unless people can walk in the shoes of the other, and this applies across issues. It's not about healthcare. It applies to war. It applies to
Everything.
the many current conflicts in the world that we won't get into here and are outside of my scope of my films. But this is a powerful medium to build empathy and create
Absolutely.
connection across borders. And Ady, was the perfect metaphor and the perfect vehicle for that. We went all kinds of places with him outside of the Beltway. We were at rural trailer parks in Utah, and these people were not Democrats that he was meeting, and they loved him. He just
Yeah.
had this ability to connect with everybody, partly because he's just so funny and self-deprecating and so purposeful, but also I think because when people see him in their state, they're confronted with their own mortality
Yeah.
and what a life of meaning means. So yeah, and these thoughts have been cutting me more deeply over the last couple weeks as I think about what his legacy means. But I'm very proud to be a part of his story and for the film to have been a small platform. And I will mention, just for viewers who do see it and are energized about these issues on a political level, to Google the Be a Hero Fund,
Yeah.
because Ady's organization lives on and lives on beyond him, and is a really important and powerful cause, and is a way that people could get involved and support his legacy.
You do such honor to him. And I just am so thankful that you spent all that time with him. I do want to get into a little bit of the actual filmmaking next, but I want to share this one thing. I found it fascinating. I have an aging father. He now has Alzheimer's. He worked, he was on the very right side. He worked for Trent Lott. He worked, he's in the Reagan administration. And he was always fighting against, tax cuts and less social services, et cetera, et cetera. Now he's aging. He's in his 80s, and he is just clinging on to his Social Security and his Medicare because he has very little money. And it is interesting how when your situations change, whether you are sick or you have an issue that you've been campaigning against, and all of a sudden you're in that boat, it makes you see things very differently. And I think that's kind of what we experience when we watch your film. We're sitting in Ady's chair for a lot of the movie, and rolling around with him wherever he goes. And there's just no way you can't put yourself in his shoes, for an hour and a half. So anyway,
Well,
thank you
thanks for
for
sharing
that.
that. I'm sorry to hear about that. And I have a similar personal story in that my father passed away in 2015 from stroke, and was in similar sort of health challenges in terms of a tracheostomy and all that Ady has in his final years. And he was a very staunch Republican, believe it or not. And again, not to get too political here, but it was the VA system, and
Oh,
having he was a veteran, and having that care was what, made it possible for us the last couple of years to care for him. So, ironically, that experience, made me and my relationship to him kind of push me further and have that personal. And I do think there's something everybody in the film can relate to. ALS is obviously very extreme, and to get it at such a young age is just undeniably tragic. And it's not, doesn't matter, universal healthcare or not. That's a terrible thing to happen to somebody, but I think everybody sees something in this. So many people have come up to me and said, this person had, I know my uncle had ALS, or this, so-and-so has Parkinson's, stroke like my father had. And it's very, Ady's story is very specific and yet somehow very universal. And that's what I think, again, to zoom out, I'm always looking for in documentary film subjects.
That's what makes a great documentary film, for sure. So let's talk about the filmmaking. How long did you, work on this film? I want to know all those things. How did it start? How long did you work on it? What was the budget? What were the challenging things? What were the, big wins? Tell me about the actual making of the film.
Yeah. So, I can rewind very far into how I got connected to Ady, which kind of takes us into a little bit of my career, because I didn't meet him as a sort of feature film subject. I, early in my, so it's a good segue to talk about People's TV, and you brought up, how these things actually get made. So I'm happy
Leave
to
it
share
all
more.
in there. I wanted to know about all those things. So go.
Yeah. So, I have made a couple of films before this, but coming from kind of an advocacy background and storytelling background, I decided pretty early in my career to bring that skill set of filmmaking and character-driven storytelling to brands, to businesses, to nonprofits, and I started a company to do that when I was relatively young, which has been around for 10, 12 years now, called People's Television. And it started with really just me and a business partner. And we've grown it over the time to 2 offices, one in New York and DC. And I've really focused on that more proactively than I have on feature filmmaking, in part because I really believe that organizations that are doing important work in the world need great storytelling. And that became increasingly true, especially in the age of social and digital media, where what the stories brands wanted to tell kind of migrated outside of the 30-second TV ad into opportunities to talk about the people they're helping in their nonprofit communities that they serve, or the environmental sustainability initiatives that companies have, or diversity initiatives. And so we built a kind of niche doing stories about impact for companies as well as for political campaigns and causes. And in 2018, I got a call from Liz Jaff, who is a political consultant that people who see the film will recognize.
She was
And
great.
she said, crazy story. I just met this guy on a plane. You might have seen it on the news. Him and I are starting a healthcare advocacy group, and we need a short launch video for our YouTube. Could People's TV take on this job? We don't have a big budget, but it's important work, and I think you'll like this guy a lot. And I was connected to Liz through other people in the political world, and I flew out to Santa Barbara to meet him for what I thought would be a kind of short promotional film for the Be a Hero campaign. I sort of imagined it to be like oh, it's sad, he's got ALS, he wants healthcare, and the very first meeting I ever had with Ady is actually in the film. It's the opening credits. He's taking his shirt off and he's joking about his abs, and with his wife. And it was just this incredible moment. I did the whole interview with him about his story and was just weeping and laughing the whole time, again, for a 2-minute video. And at the very end of that interview, I said, Ady, let's do this Be a Hero launch video, and then let's make a movie. And I'm like, normally it takes a couple of months and we'd be talking a lot, But when I met him was 2018. He'd already had ALS for 2 years. And he only had about 6 months from that moment of speaking. And we didn't know at that time if he would still be able to communicate after, which thankfully he did for another 5 years. So this is all to say that we accelerated that process. He agreed right away. And, there was a lot more to that dynamic. He's talked a lot in interviews about that he did have some apprehension, but wanted a, record for his family. Again, it's like heavier for me right now to talk about a lot of this than it was just a few weeks ago.
Take your time. I think maybe I'm wondering if you start off thinking, oh my goodness, we don't have a lot of time. You only gave him a couple of years or 3 years. And then all of a sudden you get into this, wow, we've made it 4, and so maybe you think there's longer, and then all of a sudden they're gone. And I had this situation. I did a World War II film focused on World War II veterans and their issues and things. And I had my, favorite veteran that was going to be at the opening of my film. And 2 days before that, he passed away.
Oh, wow.
And it was just devastating, So I understand trying to go and talk about that. So take your time.
Well, I'd love to see that film. I will say, and I'm jumping ahead in time now, but in 2021, after I promised to do him justice, I got Ady to the red carpet at our premiere in Hollywood, packed house, standing ovation. And, it was one of the best moments of my
I'm so glad he got to see that.
I was watching him the whole time to see what he thinks. And he is a very critical guy, as you can see in the film. He, provocative and somebody that pushes everybody to do their best work. And, he gave me a kind of knowing eyebrow raise, which meant that it was good. And that meant the world to me. And, even now in so many of the tributes, people have talked about the film as how they discovered him and all of that. So, in some respects, there's a happy ending, and I'm sorry you didn't get that with that one subject on your project. And hopefully, their family and others who you honored appreciated it. But quickly from there, we kind of went in on spec and just started filming. I used resources from People's TV. One of the reasons that I do this brand work is it gives us some flexibility to explore stories that are interesting because we have paying clients and are not entirely dependent on, let's say grants, which is another way, or investors. We did get some of those, including Bradley Whitford and the Duplass brothers, who both supported the film and became executive producers. I met Bradley through Ady. Ady and him had met at a protest and had fallen in love with him. And I've become very close to Bradley over the last, especially over the last week, but over the last few years. And Bradley said, well, I don't know anything about documentaries. I'm an actor, but talk to my friends, Mark and Jay, who are filmmakers that I've, known and respected forever. And I'm very grateful to be connected to them through this whole journey. And they all came in as executive producers. We also did end up getting grants from a number of different places, but not at first. There was really nobody at the beginning who kind of understood what it was, because Ady wasn't really famous at the time. He was just this kind of sick dad who had this viral moment. I think later on, everybody got it, but we got a lot of rejection from a lot of funders, a lot of people who just said, I think they thought it sounded too sad.
Well, it was kind of sad.
Yeah. Yeah. No, fair enough. It was, and it is kind of sad. And that scared people who maybe wanted something more, commercial or big or bright, but ultimately.
But let me just say one thing. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I don't want to give people the wrong idea. There were many humorous moments. Yeah. There were many humorous moments, and it was winning. And there were wins there in his journey. So I don't want to make people think you're going to watch this and feel so sad all the time.
No, I mean, I really wanted to make something that's very life affirming. And even though I'm sad this week, I mean, my outlook on life and sense of purpose is greatly increased. And I think if you watch this movie, you will feel better. I wanted that in the first place, because knowing him made me feel better. And it's hard to explain that about a movie about a a terminal illness. And yeah, so that journey was very winding. I had a great team of people on the film. My
How
producer.
big was your team?
Well, the really key person was my co-writer and producer, Amanda Roddy, who was really on the journey with me from the beginning. We had an incredible editor named Kent Bassett, who had actually made his own movie about chronic pain, and so was really familiar with healthcare storytelling, and is just an incredible editor. So much of the, I think, humor really came to life. I mean, a lot of that is, yeah, Ady's funny, but it was, just like a narrative film. It's happens in the camera work. It happens in post. We had several cinematographers on the project.
Did you shoot as well?
I did shoot as well. Yeah, mostly. I'm not a very good shooter, and we could have a whole other conversation about putting together good crews. I'm a terrible DP, but I was very close to Ady, and I actually lived at Ady's house for pretty long stretches at a time in his kind of garage extra bedroom, so that I could be close to the family and film dinner time scenes without a crew and without anybody there, which I knew would help increase the intimacy.
It did.
But I'm based in New York, and I had a LA-based cinematographer. A lot of the filming was in DC, so I had a DC-based cinematographer, Ryder Hask. So there was, and tried to create as much visual cohesion as we could with all those different voices. And of course, a lot of the best footage in the film is shot on cell phones.
Yeah,
what Liz shot on the plane, which is really the best piece of footage in the whole movie. And I really am, to segue into that, very tool agnostic. And I think that phones are great devices. You need good sound, but I'm not a big gear head. And, I think really documentary film is all editing.
It is. It's all storytelling in the end. And sometimes, like you said, like Liz's video is not great video quality, but it kind of doesn't matter. You're in the subject matter and it's, intense. So yeah, you're completely right. Can I ask you how much the budget was?
I would feel more comfortable talking to viewers like offline about it, because I do help viewers on an individual basis with this. And I'm just like, if there's producers or filmmakers in the audience that want to reach out to me and have a project and get feedback, I'm always down to do that. I'm on Instagram at Nick Brockman, and you can post my socials. The one reason I don't share it publicly is that we still are working. I'll just tell you why people don't share them publicly, even though I'm all for transparency in the industry, is that when negotiating with distributors or other people who might acquire the film, you don't want to undersell yourself or oversell yourself. So I don't like this aspect of being...
That actually is a great, we're here to learn. The filmmakers that listen want to learn. So I think that's a great...
that's just why I can't publish it. But on an individual level, you or any of your audience wants to reach out to me, I actually am very much for producing transparency, but I can't publish the budget on a film that's still in the sales process.
I totally understand. Now, I did read somewhere it was on Hulu.
Yes, the film's on Hulu now, so that's where folks should check it out. Okay,
but you have other things in the future for this film, you hope?
Yes, so So generally speaking, it might be worthwhile to talk about the whole distribution of the film in general, but that was also a very complicated journey. I was talking about the editing last. The film took a year to edit, which was probably where the most of our expenses came from, just that duration of time. And I think that's how long it takes kind of to edit a really strong character-driven documentary. The film premiered at South by Southwest in 2021, and where you mentioned it got some awards, which was great. But it
got the audience award, which is pretty amazing.
Yes, it was cool. It was also virtual that year because of the pandemic, which was not ideal, but it was.
Mine released during the pandemic too, and it was a nightmare. It was horrible.
Oh gosh,
I feel your pain. I feel your pain.
So we ended up piecing the different rights together. We could have a whole hour-long conversation about distribution, but POV ended up taking the broadcast rights, which is a great PBS documentary strand. I was very proud to be a part of it. And then Greenwich Entertainment did a theatrical run, and they ultimately ended up selling it to Hulu as a streaming partner. So it is done, and the film is out in the world, and viewers can check it out on all those platforms as well as VOD. But we are trying to renew and redo some deals, so the rights come up every couple of years. And but the film was made for six figures. I can share that, and that's kind of what I think most people are making indie documentaries
Right.
for.
Yeah.
Most larger, bigger celebrity rock and roll things are often in the low seven figures. This was on that indie side of the scale.
So we're running out of time. There's so many other things that I want to ask you. I've got to talk about Minted because I did watch both of these films in the same day, and I watched Minted first. And I was just like, oh my gosh, it opened up a whole new world that I never knew was out there. I mean, I heard the terms NFT thrown around. I actually am on Robinhood, and I have some Bitcoin. And so I know cryptocurrency is out there, but I don't know what any of that means. And I don't know what the impact is or was. And I remember there was a big crash, but I mean, your film was brilliant in how it told the story. And that's what, for me, was the most remarkable, is how you told the story, because you really did show all the highs of the NFT world, and then all of a sudden the crashes, and then there's still the hope. And so it is the journey of that, and you see it from so many different points of view. So talk about how that started. Talk about how you decided to tell the story. Anything you want to let us know, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that you watched that first, because most people who've seen my work obviously saw Not Going Quietly first, which came out first, and they really couldn't be more different in some
No.
ways. So I was really interested in NFTs because actually before I got so political and activisty and social changey, I was interested in digital art. And my very first films that I made as a kid were kind of, abstract digital video. I studied video art in college. I went to an art school. And only from there, it connects to my personal journey. So I'm trying to thread both together here in the
Yeah.
interest of
And
time.
so real quick though, I think we need to explain what an NFT is, because my
Yes.
audience may not. So do a little bit of term explaining in the middle
Yes,
of
good.
it.
So hopefully the film explains this, but
Yeah.
NFT stands for non-fungible token. And it is a term that exploded in the media in 2021. And it is become a very divisive, controversial, ridiculed, and complex topic that is adjacent to the whole topic of cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin and Ethereum. And it's a virtually impossible thing to explain
Yes.
because it all sits on a very complex technology called the blockchain. And it's something that has been, I think, confounding to people for many years since the advent of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies nearly 15 years ago. But I think most people have come to accept the fact that Bitcoin and things like it are probably here to stay, whether we sort of like them or not, that this is a sort of digital store of value that people are able to transact in some way. And I try not to, in the film, take a particular value judgment. This concept stirs up a lot of strong emotional reactions in people.
You argued both sides. That
Yeah.
was what was interesting to me. You argued both sides.
Yes, exactly. And I think both sides are really interesting because I think it raises a lot of interesting conversations about the role of technology in society, about how technology has the power to the similarity between this and Not Going Quietly is that many people believe that these technologies have the power to quote unquote decentralize power away from powerful institutions. So big cryptocurrency evangelists believe that Bitcoin has the power to give power to the people and take it away from the big banks or from the Federal Reserve and central government. And what people believe about NFTs is that we can take that same concept of digital currency and apply it to art and other things like art. And you have to watch the movie, hopefully, to
You
wrap your
do.
mind around it. but
You have to have the visuals. I mean, that's what I
yeah.
loved about what you did is you were telling, it all starts with art and you were telling the story in an art way. It was just brilliant. And again, we're running short on time. I would love to talk a lot more about that, but I really am interested. Where can you watch Minted, by the way? Let's say that real fast.
So Minted is not out yet. It premiered this year at the 2023 Tribeca Film Festival. And we are working on distribution now, and hopefully we will have some exciting news about that very soon.
I hope so. That's super exciting. Okay, we still are getting really close to time. I want to learn more about you. You are a fascinating individual. You've accomplished amazing things in your 39 years. So tell me, give me the 2 minute summary of your, life story and your filmmaking journey. How did you get here?
Yeah, so I thank you for those kind words. I still feel like I'm striving, at the climbing, trying to break into the industry, even now. I grew up. My family's from New York City. I'm of mixed um, heritage. My mother's family's from India. My father's family is American, and I there are many artists in my family, mostly in classical music. My mother was an opera singer. Her father was a sitar player. My brother is a classical pianist in Europe. And I think I wanted to get into the arts, but as far away from music as I could, because I was always going to be overshadowed by them. And I just was picking up, my mom bought me my first video camera, I think at 7 years old. And I made all kinds of short films. I wanted to be a music video director. I wanted to be a video artist, as I mentioned, which got me interested in some of the artists that are in Minted. And then around when I was 17 years old, living in Upper Manhattan, was when 9/11 happened. We talked a
Mm,
lot about lack of understanding and um, the xenophobia and othering, I think was the word used, which I
mhm.
agree with. And I went down to the World Trade Center site on that day. I rollerbladed
Wow.
down there with my video camera. And the next couple of years for the country was very complicated. And I was active in some anti-war protests. And I really felt that the tool of the camera, especially as differentiated from mainstream news and the medium of documentary, whether short or long form, but of this kind of character storytelling, was basically the best way that I could raise my voice as an artist. And again, not everything I do is all about peace and love, but I made a film about immigration that has a very similar thematic issues, also has a disability connection in it. One thing worth mentioning is that my grandfather, who was from India, was blind and was
Oh.
and opened the Lighthouse for the Blind in India, and so was very active. This is in the 1950s when there were no rights for the blind. And my aunt and uncle are both people with disabilities. My aunt has cerebral palsy and was very active in the movement to get the Americans with Disabilities Act passed in 1990. And don't identify as a person with a disability, but many of my films have touched on this. And there's just a lot of social advocacy in my family. So I think I was lucky with that, to be exposed to that at an early age. I went to state school to the State University of New York at Purchase. This is not an elite film school, I should mention. I did not get into NYU, and where most of the really successful documentary filmmakers went, or to USC or Columbia. So I still consider myself kind of like outsider public school kid. And I worked at another film production company for several years before starting my own to kind of learn the ropes. And I really believe that it's really important for people who want to direct, and whether it's narrative films and they admire Quentin Tarantino or Michael Moore, to really think about sustainability and the economics of achieving that goal. And for me, that was doing this commercial and client work. And at first, when I started out, I was shooting and editing myself for, anybody that would hire me to do stuff. And over time, I built a team and a specialization. And I think really my craft is really producing and understanding. And now I'm more of a CEO role. I have 10 employees between Washington, D.C. and our New York office. But for me, I was a very good editor. I was never a good camera person, as I mentioned earlier. And I really advise young filmmakers get really great at a craft that is adjacent or in the industry. George Lucas was very famous for knowing how to do the makeup for the actors, knowing how to do the miniature modeling, knowing how to do the sound. And I really think that people who want to direct and storytell should actually understand the nuances of it, and more specifically, get really good at one thing: color correcting, gaffing and lighting. And that way you can have a job in the industry where you're exposed to other people and you make those connections, which brings me to my number 2 piece of advice for anybody breaking in, young, old, or otherwise, which is to find your tribe. That documentary filmmaking is a very collective team sport. That's my favorite thing about it. I think one of the reasons I didn't want to be my brother's a concert pianist, and it's amazing, but it's very rigorous and sometimes solitary endeavor. So is filmmaking, but this movie, Not Going Quietly Minted, was with an amazing squad of people that I hope to continue making films with. A lot of the camera people that shot Not Going Quietly also shot Minted, and you develop a language and a relationship, and there's no way you can be great at every element of it. So find a skill that's marketable. That way you don't have to work, in retail or outside the industry, because you want to be around it. You're not going to get, unless you're rich, nobody's going to give you the keys to direct a film right away. And if you find a great story and want to pursue it, you're going to have to use your own money. So how are you going to get that? While having time. And so again, this is not easy, what I'm saying, but it's, networking is great. And I really try to pay it forward in terms of being really open to consultation and outreach. I am going to speak on a panel at Doc NYC about film ethics. Last week at Double Exposure, I met with young volunteers. I went to Haiti to do a filmmaking workshop. And this is all to say that if your viewers want to reach out to me about their projects, about what they're working on, I'm really, DM's always open on social media. I really love helping young filmmakers, however I can, because it's so hard, and we need more great stories told.
That is just beautiful. I mean, you're an amazing person. I just am so thankful that you've spent this time with us. I have learned a lot, and I just want to cheer you on. I'm just such a fan of your work and who you are as a person. Now that I've gotten to speak with you, I know our listeners will love you as well and be so grateful that you are so humble and willing to pay it forward. I think that is hard to find in our industry, but it is so needed. It really is so needed, not necessarily for fantastic, stellar work necessarily, but I think our industry is hungry for others that care and that really want to tell good stories in a humane way, where we're not killing ourselves in order to, to make a living or to get the film made. So anyway, we're going to wrap up here. We're not even going to have time for DocuView Deja Vu today. You'll have to check in next week. But if you are a Patreon listener, we're going to record a short little segment here. We're going to ask him some fun questions about what it's like to work with Bradley Whitford and the Duplass brothers. So stick around or join Patreon so you can come and hear that little extra. So Nick, thank you so much for being here. I would love to have you back. There's just so much we did not touch on. So
absolutely. Thank you. It's great. It was an honor to be here. And
thank you so much.
Appreciate what you're doing with your platform.
Yeah. All right, everybody, we're gonna wrap it up here. Thank you so much for listening to Documentary First, where we believe everyone has a story to tell and you can be the one to tell it. Bye, everybody.